Doesn't make any difference what race you are or your ethnicity. The Friends Group, through the library, can reach every single person in the community. And to me, when somebody asks, why should I join a Friends Group? That's one of the selling points, because your work through that Friends Group will impact literally everybody in the community. So thank you for what you do through your Friends Group for the library and in turn for your local community. I don't think the impact of a library on a community could ever be overstated. Andrew Carnegie, the great industrialist from the turn of the 19th century, was a great philanthropist and a huge supporter of libraries. He once was quoted as having said, "A library outranks any other one thing that a community can do for the benefit of its citizens." And I think Mr. Carnegie's statement back then is as true today as it was when he made it 100 years ago. Libraries are my passion. I have been involved in a Friends Group since probably 2006. Became president of the Friends of Georgia Libraries, I believe, in 2014. I'm stepping down and somebody else is going to come in, but I'm not letting go and I'm not leaving. I'll be serving as the immediate past president, so I will continue to be involved, and I'm looking forward to it. To me, libraries are unique. They're indispensable. They serve as both service centers and cultural centers. And an article that I read not too long ago extolling the virtue of libraries, the individual that wrote that article concluded it with a thought that I thought was absolutely excellent. He said, you know, a library is more, much more than a repository of books. It's much more than a house of knowledge. A library is really a house of dreams. And to me, that's what a Friends Group does. They promote people's dreams. And there's no better way to do that than through you serving through your Friends Group. The message that Friends of Georgia Libraries likes to get out to the Georgia community is you really need to love and support your library. And the best way you can do that is through volunteering. You know, if you think about it, we really do live in a very fast-paced society today. And it's easy for people to come up with excuses for not volunteering. You know, I'm too busy. I've got kids I've got to take care of. I've got sporting events to take the kids to. I just can't take the time, and I'm really just not interested in volunteering. The number of excuses that they come up with is large, but it doesn't come close to the benefits of serving. There's so much you can do by volunteering for the library. Now, when you're volunteering, you're helping others. I truly believe we were not put on this planet to breathe air and to take up space. I think we were put here to serve others. And one of the best ways to do that is through the volunteer work that you do. And when people volunteer, it gets people to think beyond themselves and to focus on the needs of others. And that's what it's all about, helping others that need help. One of my favorite historical characters is Winston Churchill. I really enjoy history, so I do a lot of history reading these past 10 or 20 years. Winston Churchill was one of my favorites, and he was talking about volunteering and serving others. And he said, you make a living by what you get, you make a life by what you give. I thought that was a very impressive statement. Now, you may be wondering, how in the world did I get involved with Friends of Georgia Libraries or with Friends Groups to start with? Well, I have a library story. And as I've traveled throughout the state of Georgia, I realized almost everybody growing up has a favorite story about a library, their first experience in a library. Well, if you'll indulge me a little bit of time, let me tell you my story, because it certainly impacted me in my life and what I have done with my life as a result. When I first started to learn to read as a young boy, it became painfully obvious that I was a terrible reader, just absolutely terrible, way behind my peers. So I was fortunate enough to have parents that valued reading well and comprehending well. So they lined me up with a tutor. And it just so happened that the tutor's house was 2 doors down from our local library. And my mother would take me over to the tutor's house after I got out of school. I would be tutored, and then after I finished about an hour's session, my mother said, you just need to walk over to the library, wait inside until your father gets off work, and he'll come pick you up. So the first day, I walk, after I'm finished, I see the library over there, I walk over there, and it is an impressive building. You had the granite stairs going up, great big white columns that you went through. You open the doors, and there are books everywhere, everywhere. I thought it was bigger than the Library of Congress. After I visited the Library of Congress, I said, it's kind of small compared to the library I grew up in my local community. But anyway, I go in, and it just so happens that there was a friend of mine sitting at one of the tables. So I go and sit down with him, my first experience in a library, and then I hear this lady go, shh. It was the librarian, the library manager. I looked over there, and the lady had very tight hair pulled back in a big bun and silver streaks through her hair. And to me, as a little boy, I thought she was 80 or 90 years old. She had probably just turned 40. But from my perspective back in those days, I thought she was 80 or 90. Well, I didn't know what she was trying to do, but this lady was a world-class shusher. When she shushed, everybody in the library heard it. It didn't make any difference what corner of the library you were in. When that lady shushed, everybody heard it. And when they heard it, they'd turn around to see who the object of the shushing was. I know I told you I started off as a very slow reader. I forgot to tell you I was a very slow learner also. The third time I heard that shush that day, that lady was standing in front of my table, looking down at me in my chair, and her eyes were glaring, and I didn't know what was about to happen. And she asked me, young man, do you know what library decorum is? Well, I'm sure I had a complete dumbfounded look on my face, because I had no idea why this woman that I didn't know was asking me how to decorate a library. So I'm slinking further and further down as she begins to explain to me what the definition of decorum is. And it was painful to have to sit through that lesson on how you're supposed to behave in a library. But after we got through that experience, she turned out to be a very good friend. Every time I walked into that library, she would say hello. Every time I left, she would tell me goodbye. When they had a new exhibit out, you know, and I told her on that first day, this was the first time I'd ever been in a library. She gave me a tour of the library and showed me where the different books are, where my age group's books could be located, showed me the various exhibits that they had, and they were always changing out exhibits. It was just a fascinating place. And the thing that I enjoyed the most is I could go over to a row of books, and they were on every topic imaginable. Some topics I had never even heard of. I could pick out any book out of that huge selection. I could pick out any book I wanted, open it up, and turn to any page I wanted to, and start reading on any page I wanted to. I didn't have to start on page 1 and read all the way through before I could put it back up again. And by the time, and when I was finished with the book, Nobody tested me on how fast I'd read it. Nobody tested me on my comprehension. I was allowed to read it for the pure enjoyment of reading. And that impressed me so much. That's what got me interested in reading. And I became a much, much better reader. And I read all the time now. I probably read 4 novels a month now. But I love reading. I read every genre out there. In that library, I could pick books on travel to places I'd never even heard of. It was just unbelievable. It was an incredible experience. And because of that lady and her spending just a little bit of time with me, I really became passionate about libraries. And the thing about her is she never knew what impact she had on me. And I'm just one person, but she had no idea of what impact on me, and certainly never knew that the impact she did have on me led me to have an impact on libraries all over the state of Georgia just because of her. And when you're volunteering as part of your friends group for the library, I can guarantee you, you're going to have the same impact on somebody or more than one person in the community that that librarian had on me. You'll never know what that impact is, but I can assure you that the impact is going to be significant, and it's a multiplier effect. When you impact somebody, they'll take what they learn from you, they'll spread it around other members in their community, and it goes on and on and on. It is absolutely amazing. Your work is going to have people in your community, and I congratulate you for your willingness to serve as a friend of your local library. Now, I know when you got the packet on what was going to be presented in this particular conference, you quickly came down to the bottom where it had memorandums of understanding. And I know you were just filled with excitement. What a spicy topic to get to listen to on a Friday, late on a Friday afternoon. Could it be any more exciting than memorandums of understanding? Well, that's why I really appreciate you all sticking with me and listening to this, because they are important. They're very important, and you should know about memorandums of understanding. It's pretty straightforward, but I had never really heard of memorandums of understanding until about 3 or maybe 4 years ago, when our state librarians got with me and said, you need to start talking about this and promoting friends groups across the state to adopt a memorandum of understanding. And she was absolutely correct in that the memorandum of understanding sets out the relationship between the two parties. You've got the librarian and the librarian's staff, and you've got the friends groups. Those two entities have the same goal: making that library the best it can possibly be for the benefit of everybody in the community. But where we run into problems is one side decides they want to take this path over here to my right, and this entity decides they want to take this path over to my left, so that they're going in completely different paths. They're not together, different paths, in order to try to reach that same goal. When we get contacted from a librarian or a friends group to tell us they're having problems with one another, it's always, almost always, a relationship problem. The great thing about having a memorandum in place is you can eliminate your chances of having those future relationship problems if everybody is on the same page from the beginning. And as friends groups go through the years, you'll naturally see the board and the members become older, and there's a lot of turnover. So if somebody gets in 10 years later, they may have no idea precisely what the relationship between the Friends group and the library is supposed to be. So they need to be educated. And the best way to do that is when they join the Friends group, or when they join, particularly when they join the board, definitely when they join the board, they should be given a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding. And we, I don't know what the relationship or what the percentage is of Friends groups that have Memorandums of Understanding with their local libraries. I would suspect is probably very similar to Georgia. We have very, very few. But now, every time somebody contacts us about wanting to establish a Friends group, we make it a point to urge, and almost to the point of insisting, that they have a Memorandum of Understanding in place so that they can avoid some future problems. Some problems we've run across, and I won't mention names, but these are true problems. We had one group that was not getting along with the manager of the library. They had raised money. They were having all kinds of issues, all kinds of relationship issues. So the Friends group was going to threaten just to dissolve, but they had a pretty good size of money in the account. Well, they decided they were going to take the money that they had raised on behalf of the library, and they were going to give it to another charitable organization. In this case, they wanted to give it all to the Humane Society. That's a great organization, but you cannot give money that you've raised for the library to somebody other than the library. It doesn't make any difference how great that other organization may be. That is the library's money, and it has to go to the library. Another common problem we run across is Friends groups raise money, and all of a sudden they take on a life of their own. They, instead of figuring out, let's take this money and provide it for the library's benefits. Instead of doing that, their focus becomes not on serving the library, but on seeing how much money they can raise. And so each year, that bank account just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're not spending the money. We run across this a lot. I had an extreme case about a year ago where a Friends group was sitting on $45,000 that they had raised over a period of years. And the librarian was going to have a staff development day. And they were going to do training for the staff, and they wanted to bring in lunch as part of the training program. They decided they were going to get pizzas and salads and cookies and drinks, and they needed about $125 to pay for the staff training lunch. They were in a terrible budget crisis with their local government, so their funds had been slashed. They had run out of money, but they wanted to be able to provide lunch for the staff, $125 or so. They asked the Friends group. The Friends said, no, we don't think that's a proper expenditure. But yet they're sitting on $45,000. So, and you can imagine the library manager reaction when she was told they could not even afford to give her $125 out of the $45,000 that they were sitting on. So there is a prime example of where everybody needs to understand the relationship. They need to understand that the money they raise is for the library, and it needs to go to it needs to be spent. When you've raised it for something, it needs to be spent on it. It doesn't need to stay in an account and just continue to grow, because that's not helping anybody. It's not helping the library. It's not helping the members of the community. So that's one example of what a Memorandum of Understanding will do for you. Now, let's Let me pull up the first slide on our Memorandum of Understanding. This is a sample Memorandum of Understanding I'm going to show you. Pull up in just a minute. If you'll hit the next slide, move to the next slide. There we go. Sample Memorandum of Understanding. Okay, this comes from, you'll see the source down there, the ALTAFF, a division of ALA. The ALTF is the Association of Library Trustees, Advocates, Friends, and Foundations. This form that I got off of their website a couple of years ago, this is a sample of what you can do to put together for a Memorandum of Understanding. Now, we'll go through this in just a minute. Let me stress that this is just an example. You don't need to take this and write it word for word and then have the Friends group sign it and have the library to sign it. Every situation, every relationship, there's going to be differences in the relationship. And it's the librarian and the Friends group that are going to have the greatest understanding of what that relationship is. And there may be some differences in the way they're doing things now or would like to do things that's not accounted for in this example. So this is just to give you some ideas, some things to think about, and then you can get together with your librarian and probably and most likely will come up with other things to put into this. All right, it starts off Memorandum of Understanding, and then you list who it's between. And it says the following will constitute an operating agreement between the Friends of, and then whatever the Friends group is, and the library, whatever the name of the library is. It will stand until and unless it is modified by mutual agreement of the Friends Executive Board and the Anytown Library Administration. The Friends' mission is to raise money and public awareness in the community to support the services and programs of the library as a nonprofit 501c3 organization. However, it is a legally distinct entity. It is not part of the library. You may kind of feel like that's kind of a legalistic statement. There is no set legalistic statement you need to have in one of these Memorandums of Understanding. There's no boilerplate language that an attorney would draw up that you need to put in there. It's really, it's a matter of logic and reasoning and sitting down with the two sides and working out what you want the relationship to be, and then just specifying in the agreement exactly what the relationship is. Okay, if we can have the next slide, it's number 3. All right, the way this one's set up, and it could be this way or it could be the opposite of what I'm going to get ready to tell you, but this starts out with statements, one-sentence statements of what is expected from the library in regards to this particular relationship. So there's a list that they set out of what's expected from the library. And it starts off, the library agrees to include the Friends in the long-term planning process to ensure that the Friends are aware of the goals and direction of the library. Highly important that the Friends group know what direction the library is headed in so that they can plan accordingly. Second, the library agrees to share with the Friends of the library's strategic initiatives at the beginning of each fiscal year and discuss with Friends how their resources and support might help forward these initiatives. So it gets you started at the beginning of each year with the sharing of goals and initiatives. Third, the library agrees to supply the Friends with a wish list each year that indicates the anticipated needs for the Friends' support. This was a very critical point of the Library Friends group that I was president of over in Brazelton, Georgia. We did it slightly different. We would sit down with the librarian at the very first of the year, and the librarian would give us a list of things she needed, and she would prioritize them. This is the thing I need most. This would be second, third, and there may be 4 or 5 items on the list. Then the Friends group would get together, come up with fundraising programs, and determine how the best way would be that we could fund these particular needs of the librarian. And when we got the money in, we would pay off and make sure that we had accomplished the first item of her priority list, and then we'd move to the second item. Sometimes we'd get them all done, sometimes we wouldn't, but we were working on the same page with the librarian as to what she needed and what was most important to her. So we start off at the beginning of the year. She gives us a list. Now, we would come back, and if we had back then a memorandum of understanding, we would put in there that we'd come back halfway through the year, meet with the librarian again, because needs change and priorities change. So we would meet with her midway through the year and have her reprioritize her list or change it out so that we would know what was most important for her in the second half of the year. And we would do those 2 meetings each year, and it really, the working relationship was very smooth. It worked out great. All right, the next item on the list, the library agrees to provide the Friends. Let me back up on the wish list. One other point I want to make. The wish list needs to be specific. Okay? Not just general wishes or things. It needs to be specific. And if the more specific the librarian can be, the easier it's going to be for the Friends group when you go out to fundraise. I think there's a world of difference going out into the community and trying to raise money saying, well, we'd like for you to give to the library. Well, that's all well and good, and everybody thinks libraries are great, but if you can go to them and say, we've got this fundraiser going because the librarian wants this piece of equipment. It's going to cost X thousands of dollars, but whatever you give us as part of this fundraising project, this is where that money is going to go. When individuals can see a specific project, marketing studies will show you they're much more likely to give than if you ask them just to give a general donation. At the end of the year, whatever we had purchased on behalf of the library, we would have a day when we would celebrate the library, and we would have like helium balloons or some way of identifying every single item we bought in that year. And sometimes we'd go back to previous years, particularly if it was a major expenditure, so that people could come in the library and see the exact piece of equipment that they donated money for. So it worked out great, and the librarian appreciated it. The people in the community appreciated it, and it was just having that visual, being able to see, wow, this is where my money went. Look at this piece of equipment, this program. And kids would be sitting there using it, this learning center, and they said, oh, this is really great for the community. This is great for the library. And that's when you say, well, we're glad you think it's great, and we're glad that it's doing such a good job for the community. We want you to join our Friends group so that you can help us in the future with more projects just like this. So remember, specific priority list. All right, next, the library agrees to provide the Friends with staff support to assist them with development of the newsletter, mass mailings, meeting coordination, and Friends promotional materials. Some libraries are better able to do that. There's some that just don't have the employees to be able to support something like that. But if you got a library that can support it, I would certainly put that in the Memorandum of Understanding so that everybody knows that the library is going to help you in these items: the newsletter, the mass mailings, the meeting coordination, and Friends promotional materials. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Next is the library agrees to provide public space for Friends membership brochures and promotional materials. I'm sure your friends group, if they're like the ones in Georgia, they have all kinds of promotional materials, and the best place to get them out is the library, because that is your captive audience. Those are the people that are using the library are the people that are going to be most interested in your membership brochures, because if they're using the library, if you have mothers bringing their children over there for programs and you want to be able to hand out membership brochures and tell them that this particular program, for example, we used to do summer reading programs, thanks to the Friends of the Brownsville Library, and if it hadn't have been for the Friends of the Brownsville Library, your children would not have been able to enjoy the program we had today. We would like to continue being able to provide these. If you'll join the Friends group for a nominal fee, you'll help us see that programs like this are continued well into the future. All right, next, the library agrees to provide the Friends with space in the library for book storage, sorting, book sales, and office needs. This can certainly be an area of friction between librarians and friends, particularly when books start to mount up. If you don't have any place to put them, if they get in the way, that doesn't make for happy campers. We ended up with our library, we were fortunate enough, we found a storage unit. There was a man that had a bunch of these storage units, and he donated one as part of his contribution to the library. And so we stored all of our stuff in the storage unit, because our library was very small and didn't have space. But that is certainly one thing that needs to be in there, so that there's an understanding of, are you going to be able to have space? All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, the Friends agree that any and all monies raised will be spent exclusively for library programs, services, and other library-defined needs, unless otherwise agreed to by both the Friends and the library. This would have helped out the group that wanted to give all of their money to the Humane Society. They would have known up front you couldn't have done that, so they wouldn't have raised the ire of the librarian by trying to do this. So this is critical. Money you raise is for the library. Next, the Friends agreed that the library administration has the final say in accepting or declining any and all gifts made to the library. Sometimes, believe it or not, you'll get somebody that wants to donate something that's the library just doesn't think is appropriate. So they need to have the final say as to what they're going to allow and what they're not going to allow. Next, the Friends agree to engage in advocacy efforts on behalf of the library under the guidance of the library. I think this is very important. When the local government's meeting and they're dealing with issues involving the library, the Friends of the library need to be at those meetings and be the voice for the library position on that particular issue. Next, the Friends agree that if they cease to actively fundraise and promote the library, they will disband, allowing for a new Friends group to be established in the future. If the Friends group goes inactive, and particularly if you've got a librarian that really would like the help of a Friends group, this gives the librarian the option of being able to disband the Friends group and on down the road start another. Sometimes, well, personalities get involved in this a lot, and sometimes certain personalities, you need a period of time where they move on and you bring in new personalities, and then the relationship's much better, particularly if you've got a memorandum of understanding in place. And I think that was the last slide on the sample memorandum. This is my contact information. I'm going to answer questions in just a minute. However, if anybody has any questions that you think of later and you want to get a hold of me, or any other thoughts that you may have or want to get a hold of me for whatever reason, this is my contact information, friendsbwjlibrary@gmail.com. I'd be happy to hear from you. And like I said, don't hesitate to contact me if you think I've got anything that could possibly help you out. Now, I'm willing to take questions, easy ones. All right, Kitty says she does not see any questions just yet. Anybody busy typing? Kitty, any?
Charlotte says thank you for the information, very helpful.
Charlotte said, thank you for the information, very helpful. Well, if the pleasure was all mine, I'm happy to share it with you. I think this is a great conference that y'all have had here today, since I'm the last one on the list. And I appreciate the opportunity of joining in with you. And I love going to see libraries and visiting with local friends groups. It makes my day. So thank you for having me. Anything else?
Would you be willing to review one that we were planning to create if someone was?
That's a good question. The question was, would I be willing to review one if it was created by a friends group prior to submitting to the library? Yes, if one had been created prior to.
If a friends group created one, would you be willing to review it?
Okay, if a friends group created a memorandum of understanding, would I be willing to review it? Always, always. Just get a hold of me and I'd be more than happy, and I'll get right back to you.
Friends groups who have multiple friends groups, would you recommend an MOU between each friends group and their branch, or should it be a system-wide? Okay,
the question was, for friends groups where there's multiple friends groups in a branch, would I recommend individual memorandums of understanding or one main one? I would recommend I have no problem with one main one, but I would definitely recommend that you have it with your individual librarians, because that's where the working relationship is. If you have conflicts, that's where they're going. That's generally where they come up with is your librarian and your friends group. So I would recommend each individual friends group have a memorandum of understanding with their librarian. That was a very good question. Okay. Well, thanks again. It's certainly been a pleasure, and I wish y'all, I know 2020 has been awful. I'm hoping 2021 is going to be much better, and looking forward to y'all having great success with your libraries and your friends groups next year.
You're not getting away just yet. We got one more question.
Oh, one more question.
All right. What is the difference between an MOU and a friends set of bylaws?
Okay. The question is, what's the difference between a friends set of bylaws and an MOU, a memorandum of understanding? The difference is the bylaws are the governing document for the friends group. It's not a governing document and does not set the relationship with the librarian. It sets out the mission. It sets out how many officers you're going to have, what the term's going to be, how many directors you're going to have. It sets out the term of membership. It sets out how you're going to amend the bylaws. But it is strictly a document that governs just the friends group and does not affect directly the library. It's the memorandum of understanding that's going to have the direct effect on the library and the friends group. So they're completely separate documents with very different purposes. Good question.
Question from Paul. Have you seen difficulties more with small libraries and their friends groups, or large libraries with their friends groups? Or no difference?
The question was, have I seen more problems with small libraries and friends groups or large libraries and friends groups? I'm trying to think of examples. I don't think I've seen any difference. I haven't seen more or less. What I have noticed is when a friends group gets older, there seems to be more problems with an older friends group than with a younger friends group. And I think that's, and again, I think that's where a memorandum of understanding can come into play, because the older friends group, the older members over particularly 10, 15 years, they feel like the friends group is theirs. They've grown to feel like they are really separate from the library. It's their friends group and they're here and the library is over here. which is not the relationship. So you need to reiterate, and the Memorandum of Understanding will do that, but you need to reiterate what that relationship is. And I've seen that, like I said, older friends groups seem to have that problem more than younger ones. I wish we had more younger ones. We have some problems bringing in younger volunteers, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. Any other questions? Okay, well, it was fantastic. Thank you all again for sticking with me. I didn't see a single person fall asleep, so I did a Zoom presentation for one of my children's classes. 2 people fell asleep in the middle of it. So y'all are great. Thank you.